Hi everybody, this is Tina Schmdit and thank you for joining me. Today I was in a mood to do a waterfall. I've done waterfall paintings before. They're always a little different. They're pretty spontaneous, so if you can hang with me on that and follow along, that would be great. So I don't usually start with a sketch unless I've really got something strong in mind. But with waterfalls, there's so many different ways you can go once you kind of put your paint on there in the water and kind of watch it smush around and go where it wants to go. Basically, I let the painting paint itself. So that's what we're going to do today. So I'm going to be using, most of my colors are Daniel Smith. And I'll be using Cerulean Blue, maybe a little bit of my own homemade blue. This is iridescent electric blue with a mix of Pthalo Blue. Some people call it Pthalo Blue. I will probably end up using some of this yellow. I use Hansa Yellow Medium, and in this yellow, this is iridescent gold plus Hansa Yellow Medium. So these are my two yellows, but sometimes I like that iridescent quality in there and I'll dip into that. And then I also have my, I'm going to use this burnt sienna, and it's a very limited palette. Probably might use, let's see, Quinacridone Rose. And maybe, I don't know if I want to mix my own violet, but I'll let you know probably as we move along. So it's very limited and it won't be too many colors. I want them muted, but I do want a nice scene with this waterfall. Now, I don't know if you can see this. There's some iridescent quality here coming off of this. Some of the iridescent colors like that electric blue, I don't know if you can see that. It's a combo of electric blue and phthalo. I kind of like using those in my work because it just gives it a little flash. So let's get started. I'm going to dip into fresh water and I'm going to do the whole paper. My paper is 7.5 high by 9 3/4 wide to here. So I have a seam here. This, I'm not counting the extra inch here that goes into the binder, into the to the journal, the art journal. So it really cuts off right about here, just about 1/4 inch to the left of the tape. And I have to look at the this sheet of paper at an angle to make sure I've got the whole thing soaked. Now the paper I'm using is a fluid, they call it a fluid professional 100% cotton cold press, and it's been cut down to size. It was in big full sheets, so that's what I'm using, and it's a cold press. So let's get started. So I'm going to dip into my Cerulean Blue, do a little mix, and I want to get into this while that is really wet, because I do want to make some cauliflower clouds. A lot of people avoid the cauliflower, but I think sometimes it makes some very interesting things. So my waterfall, I'm thinking the lower 2/3. And I think I'm going to put a big fall here and maybe another couple of minor ones here with maybe the lagoon here and then an embankment, something here in the foreground. I always like working foreground and middle ground and background. So I usually go from the background into the foreground. I'm just going to start with some backwash here of the sky. And I do try to get the sky done at once, because the problem with trying to double dip back into your sky is you might get some weird lines in there from the way the paint absorbs that aren't too pleasant, unless you really want that. So for me, I don't mind a little bit of that cauliflower look, but I really do try still to get it all done at once. Try not to wait till it dries to get back in, because then you get some really strange effects, and you might not want to draw attention to your sky too much, since it's a background supporting element and not a main element. Okay, we're still a little damp, but I think I could go into the next level. So I was using this, it says number 12 round, but this one was also labeled a number 12 round, and you can see they're completely different. So anyway, I'm going to use this one, my little smaller, it's probably an 8, but it said 12 on it when it was before, when it had the marking on it. Okay, this is still slightly, it's dry pretty quick. I'm going to re-wet a little bit. And what I want to do is I want to make my cliff and rock formations, but I don't want to make them hard line, because I want this painting to kind of emerge itself, you know. So, and I do want a misty layer down here. I'm kind of seeing it in my head already. I'm going to use a little bit of burnt sienna, a little bit of cerulean blue, and a little bit of rose, Quinacridone Rose. And I am going to let these colors bleed into each other. So I've got burnt sienna mixing a little bit with that rose color. And I'm going to drop in some cerulean blue a little bit. Maybe mix a little bit of that sky that I had in there before. That electric blue, that iridescent electric blue, and a little bit of that phthalo blue. And I'm going to pull some of this out. I don't want it to cover my water area. So what I'm doing while it's still wet is I'm drying my brush, rinsing my brush, drying my brush, and pulling. I'm just pulling, because see, here's where I probably want to have one of the waterfalls. And then I'm seeing something here that I might want to do another split fall. Not too much. I don't want to pull too. You have to have one area dominant. This is going to be my dominant area. So I've got to make sure that this steps up to the foreground a bit more. It's middle ground right now, but it's going to pop more forward once I get my colors in that I want and the shapes. I'll start building on it. Okay, and now as we get further, the sun's coming in from this side. It's going to cascade this way to the left. So now I'm going to take my blue and my Quinacridone Rose. I'm going to make a soft violet out of it, and I will use that blue mix of phthalo and electric blue. I think the cerulean blue is okay. I might add a tad of that, but cerulean blue tends to be a bit grainy, and I want this to push into the background, and grain tends to come to the foreground because it granulizes on the paper and makes it pop forward. So I want to use the blues that don't have as much grain in them. And I'm avoiding ultramarine because ultramarine is very strong and dominant in a way. I want to have blues that are much softer, more pastel in this. And so that's where I'm headed. Now I'm going to rinse, dry my brush, rinse again, dry, and pull. I want an area of white I can work with for my waterfall. Okay, I'm going to come in with some yellow, some burnt sienna, a little bit of Hansa Yellow Medium. Ooh, that's too strong. I don't want to make green on the mountain, not yet. I don't know if I want moss on there yet. I'm going to just touch. Ooh, too bright, too bright. See that? A little bit of Hansa Yellow. Okay, now I'm going to come in with burnt sienna, Quinacridone Rose, and a tad of neutral tint. I like that neutral tint because it makes a nice burnt umber, a nice warm burnt umber that isn't flat when I mix it with the other two colors. So, all right, now I'm going to come in here and begin to drop in a little more shape here. And here's where I begin to start really picking out the idea of a little bit more form. You see how that form is starting? See how that darker color coming in makes the lighter color pop a bit more? So now I'm on the shady side a little bit. And I'm going to bring down a little shadow. I don't want to jump into shadows too soon. I just want to sort of get a feel for this, but not too soon. See how that's looking misty now, coming out of the mist? And this is looking a little too flat. I want to bring that up. It just looks like a brick, so I want to bring it up. There we go. And now I want to push this back in shadow. And I'm going to dry out my brush a bit, and I'm just going to drag. I want some rough, dry it out and drag it. I want some of that rough texture in there. I've got some violet, some blue, some burnt sienna. Back to the violet with a little bit of that blue. That's nice. I'm going to put some yellow in here. That's that violet. A little bit of that violet with burnt sienna. Needs to be a little bit drier in here. It's too wet. There we go. I like that. So I'm mixing a little bit of the blue now, and I'm making it dry. And I want to do slightly, just barely wet on dry. And I want to drag the brush through it. I want some of those rough edges on there to look like mountain rocks. That's kind of nice right in here. Now as I come down here where there's going to be more mist, I'm going to soften some of that edge. That's starting to look good. See that? I'll let this dry. You got a little puddly there. Okay, it's a little dry. I'm going to come in with same size brush, and again now with the burnt sienna and a little bit of the Quinacridone Rose and my electric blue. I call it electric blue, but it's really got the two blues, phthalo and electric iridescent blue. And I don't want to make it muddy, so I have to decide, am I going to make it more burnt sienna-ish or cooler in the cool shades? And this time it's going to be more burnt sienna. I'm going to use the very tip of the brush, and I'm going to come in here. Oops, I don't want to draw, I want to paint. There we go. And I'm going to, I take my brush and I dry it and drag it. And so now what I'm doing is finding little areas that I can actually build on. So when you look in and you can see little different nuances, it helps bring that painting forward. It brings the cliffs forward. It helps to create form. You start seeing things in there that you probably didn't know could pop out like that, but as you develop the work, it tells you, it kind of shows you. Okay, now I'm going to, I need something brighter than burnt sienna, but not as bright as the yellow, so I'm going to mix up and make a golden kind of color. Use that here. Okay, now as I go to the shadow side, I'll go back to my blues shadow side. And it helps to have 2 or 3 water dishes to rinse, so you can get a clean rinse instead of getting something that's tinted by another color. I usually have two, one big jug, one little jug, and then or if I have a hot and cold jug, in other words the warm colors I'll rinse in one jug and the cool colors in another, and that way I'm not getting too much mud in my rinse. So you see the water is starting to emerge just by working the other parts of the background. There's a waterfall emerging. Again, I'll do the same thing with my burnt sienna. And the sunny side will be a little warmer. And the shadow side will be a little cooler. Now here's where it gets interesting. See? See how these, I can make a texture here. I can feel that mountain. I can feel those cracks in the mountain, see? There's a lot of atmosphere in here, and that's really what the waterfall paintings that I do are about. They're about this atmosphere. You have mist, and you have sky, and you have impression of temperature. And there we go. Now I'm going to come in with a little more blue. a little more blue, a little violet, using Quinacridone Rose and that combination blue. I don't want it to be purple yet. There we go, just enough. Okay, now I'm going to rinse, dry, and drag. Rinse, dry, and drag. See that? Okay, it's too wet. If it's too wet, I'm going to dry, drag, dry, and drag. Well, there we go. Okay, now I'm going to come in with just the blue, the combination blue, and I'm going to come back in, and now I'm going to start sort of texturing that mountain. You see? Can you see that? So it's presenting itself now with cliff edges. And I don't want to get too brushy, I just want to get textury. I don't want it looking like brush strokes. So what I'm doing is just using the side of the brush, letting it dry by dragging it on the cloth, and then taking it out on the paper like that. See those layers? Those nice glazes? That's nice. Now I happen to like, I wasn't always into these iridescents. I must be in this phase of iridescence. It just reminds me of heaven. The colors that can emerge and pop, and just the beauty of it all, the opulence. Now some paper, okay, some of the papers, a lot of times less expensive watercolor paper, even though they're cotton or partial cotton, part wood fiber, they might have a kind of sizing on them that does not permit a deep saturation of the paint and water, so they'll skate around on the surface. And in some cases that might be desirable. I know Arches really soaks up a lot of color, and you won't get the lift out as easy. I know Master's Touch paper hangs between something like a Grumbacher and Arches. Master's Touch is a very good paper to work with because it has the best of both worlds. It lifts easy, and it does soak, but it will not suck it up and just drink in all that paint and water like Arches does. Okay, so now we're getting somewhere. We're starting to build up these forms. Now I'm going to do the water, but before that I'm going to cast shadows now, water shadows. Very lightly. I'm going to cast these water shadows across the water before I texture the water. But what you can do now is I'm going to come in here and I am going to cast very lightly this water shadow. See that? Can you see that? Okay. Okay, I gotta watch my camera. Its battery's running low, as always, right? So see here, as I start dropping in shadow on that water, it makes this cliff pop forward. And this waterfall is facing this way, so I am going to shadow almost the whole thing. See that little golden edge there? I'm going to barely hint at light, and then I'm going to put it into shadow by casting a little bit more blue down here. And I don't want to go all the way down with dark color because I want there to be a misty haze here where the water's hitting the lake. Okay. Right. That's a cliff shadow. That works for me. Drag, kind of, there you go. Okay, we're almost to a point we're ready to move on to the foreground. But before we do, I'm going to do some more work up here on these cliffs. Burnt sienna with a tad of the blue, just to, maybe not blue. Let's go to, instead of blue, I'm going to use neutral tint. Just a dot of neutral tint. Just a tad. There we go. Dry the brush. See that? A little more burnt sienna. The other thing you might want to do is you blur your vision. You deliberately throw things out of focus, just a tad, just a bit, so that your eye can see things the way normally you do in the natural state. You're not glaring down and focusing on one detail. You're focusing sort of on the overall impression of a balance between light and dark and color. Okay, now I'm going to use the blues. I'm on the cooler side, a little darker, with a tad of, I don't know, the violet maybe. Quinacridone Rose and Blue. A little more blue, yeah. I don't want it looking too red, and I don't want it looking too blue. I've got to get it to match the value, I mean not the value, but the hue of this side, only a little darker. And so, I'm watching my battery. I'm going to come in and texture this cliffside a little bit. There we go. Look at that. Oh, that's nice. Here. I blur my eyes. I throw it out of focus a little bit so I can let the imagination pick up texture that the rocks might have. And I don't want to stare at it too closely. I want it to be able to emerge, and for some of these little nuances to come out. And I'm aware of a shadow casting this way. You see that? And there's reflective light too going on here. Reflective light from the mist and from the lake itself casting upward. So you're not going to always see things go from light to dark all the way down. That is an error that people often do in paintings because they forget about reflective light coming from the ground up or from the mist. And there's core shadowing. A core shadow is the deepest part of a shadow across a form where the form moves from light to dark. So this is the core shadow area through here. And that's what I'm bringing out in the painting a little bit. Okay. Now I want to deal with this. This looks very flat through here. Not real happy to see that, just a very plain flat surface, so I'm going to texture it, coming in with a little burnt sienna and some gold with that Hansa Yellow. I don't want to draw it on, I kind of want to imply. Better. More brown. Burnt sienna. The texture is more tea-like. In other words, the texture of the paint itself is more like tea, not like butter. It's not big, thick, and layered. It's really very soft, transparent glaze. Rinse, dry, drag right through here. There we go. Now, as the color, as it moves away from the sun, this cliff is going to be cooler down here, the cooler color. Okay, and on the shadow of the water, I'm going to use the blue and a tad, just a slight tad, of, I mean like barely touching that neutral tint to create this waterfalls shadow. I better leave that alone and let it dry a little bit. I need to see a waterfall casting its spray shadow on this rock. Okay, moving over now. I'm going to let that dry a little bit. And I'll do the same workup on these. So. Now here's a cast shadow. Not a form shadow, it's a cast shadow. It's a shadow of this water and this cliff casting on this side, facing of the mountain. There it is. There. Okay, so I'm going to come in and start working a little more on the water. Lightly touching, creating that cascade. See the shadow now. You can see that this is in shadow and this is in sun. More in sun. I'm going to put it a little bit back in shadow. It just needs to. It's too opaque. I mean too white here. There, just a bit. So what do you do when you have this and the white sky? It sort of blends, right? Well, it's okay to have pockets of that where they kind of haze into one another for atmosphere. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to start outlining that water. I've got to make a choice of where that water line is. Okay. So I'm going to come back to my Cerulean Blue sky, just a tad, not much. It's a different blue than the water blue. It's a little more, it's going to be like that. And I'm going to come across the top line of my waterfall. Like that. And then I'm going to raise that up to the sky. Like that. Look at that. See? Can you see how that created that? There's no hard line there now. But we do get to see where the sky meets the water. Dry it off and drag it up. Rinse, dry, spread it over. See that? I'm going to do the same here. You don't want the waterfall too high because then it implies it's lumpy. You got to have it come down a bit because of the erosion factor on the cliff. we're going to do something like that. Rinse, dry, drag. That's good. Another suggestion here. Look at that. Rinse, dry, drag. See that? Now, we're not losing the value of our clouds. We still have our cloud line, which is great, but now we also have the water suggested, the water top. There. Great. I'm happy with that. This one's a little misty. That's okay. I'm going to rinse, dry, and open that up a little. I may end up, this is going to change in a while. I might end up putting trees and things over here, but we'll see. Again, there's that top line. Now I don't want to make it look like a line, right? So I rinse, dry, and drag like that. There. See? And I got my waterfall tops. I need more shadow through here, more coarse shadow. It's a cast shadow, but I also need it to be a bit bolder. Do you see this area here? So I'm going to do that. Now I'm using my special blue of electric blue, iridescent, and the phthalo blue, and I'm going to come in here, dry my brush, blur my eyes so I can kind of see where that's going. Now rinse, dry, drag. Okay, now I got to add a little form to that water on the edge. It looks a little flat. So I'm going to come in over here. I'm also going to come in over here. I want that cliff line a little bit more established there. Rinse, dry, drag. Now I'm going to pull some of that up. See how I drag that up? Just flick that up like that. Oh, that's nice. Do you see that? Okay. And do the same thing over here. Now this is a little more complex. It looks a little different, but that's okay. I want it to look like there's a cliff shadow, hard line shadow on that water. That'll work. See that shadow line right there? Can you see what we did? So I'm going to now support that. This is where it just starts to develop, and you just have to bring it together. This is where you take all those impressions and you have to bring them together. Now as I get down to the water edge of the river, I'm going to lighten just a bit because I want to have that impression that there is a mist coming up. I'm going to do the same here as I add a little more form to this waterfall. Rinse, dry, and drag. I don't want it to be so flat. Okay. That's looking pretty good. Okay, now I want to work with this. Now I have a choice. I can just, gradually make this come down as, maybe different cascaded waterfalls here and group them to pour off into some river with landmass here. But what I really want to do is make them cascade, all of them, into one pond or one river, and then put some foreground elements here and some trees. And then that'll push this middle ground back. And then I'll come in and harmonize one more time with the different layers. Like right now I can see this is too much of a straight brown line. I'm going to have to bring that out gradually. So there's no problem doing that. You simply come back in and start playing with the side of the mountain there. Look at that. See that? See how you break up that straight line form? It's all salvageable. It's all changeable. Look at that. See? In fact, I'm going to do the same thing here. Great. Okay, now I am going to get a stronger brush. I'm going to go back to this one that I did with my sky. Get a nice clear rinse of water, and I'm going to come in here and start breaking up some of this water. See how these lines are a little hard? No problem. Especially with a paper that has a strong sizing on it, because you can come in here and lift. I gave myself some room. If I couldn't lift this too much, I gave myself room to add paint and make it gradual, because every paper behaves a little different. This looks like it does not want to lift that much, and that's okay. You can still play with it. So, come down here by the water's edge, and I'm going to bring that down, wet it. This will work very nice. I'm going to wet it, and then I'm going to come back in with my blue, and I am going to come in and make that blue get a nice soft edge to it. Don't worry, I'm going to work with that too, that mountain at the base. Rinse, dry, and puff. Just puff that up. Alright, now with the foreground, I want my brush to be somewhat dry. It's wet, it's damp, but I don't want it soaking. And I'm going to take that special blue, and I'm going to dry the brush. Rinse, dry, and blend right in here. Because I want that water to look like it's misty in the distance here. You see that? And I've left some waves, kind of ripples. Okay. I don't want to be too ambitious and soak it. I need to keep it dry. And the whole thing about painting this way is to not be ambitious. You've got to let these layers, you got to respect the paper, kind of let the layers dry. And every paper has a different texture and a different way it absorbs the paint. I have a video on paper, reviewing papers, and how paint responds to the paper, how the paper soaks up the paint. So you can find that in my video library. Okay, while that's drying, I'm going to now, let's see, I think I can come in here and start working with some hardline background stuff here. So, burnt sienna, Quinacridone Rose, and I'm going to make a violet. Let's see if my blue is going to do it. Yeah, that same blue. And I want it to be thicker than tea, more like coffee, but not as thick as cream. So that means more pigment and less water. And I would say almost equal amounts. Maybe a little more blue. It's almost going to be, nope, that's too dark. There we go. I want it a little more redder, like a deep burgundy. So now I'm going to start adding in some background things here. I'm going to check my time. Okay. There we go. See, there's a little landmass coming up out of the mist. And I think I will do the same over here. See that? And I'm going to darken it. I've got burnt sienna with a little, while it's still wet, burnt sienna mixed with a little bit of that blend I just mentioned of so what I'm doing is now I'm adding a little water and lifting, and I'm adding blue to get these hard edges to soften. Okay, now we're going to go on to this water area. So I'm just going to indicate it here. Excuse me. You see how I've got that mist line? And let that dry. Okay, now the next step, I'm going to do some foreground. Burnt sienna, Quinacridone Rose, a tad of neutral tint, and a little tad of that blue. Okay. I'm going to put a landmass. I'm thinking, I don't want to do it dead center because then our eye will get stuck in the middle. But if I do it off to the side, we can do that. Let's see. Yeah, that might work. Oh, I know what I'll do. I'll make an opening here for that water to come through. That'll work. A little blue. Darken that up a little. Neutral tint. Now you see how it pushes those mountains into the background. By adding foreground elements, more neutral tint. I'm going to now touch into ultramarine blue. I haven't used it at all, but I want to use it for a little bit of foreground just to deepen some of that violet color. A little blue for the foreground. Okay, now I'm going to resort to a smaller brush. I haven't done this through the whole painting. I'm going to use a more fine tip. And let's see, what else do I want? Well, let's start with this, okay? A number 1 watercolor round. I want to kind of match that color a bit. Maybe it won't match exactly, but just a few trees. And I don't want them all to be spaced out perfectly evenly. I want to group them like family units. When trees grow, they drop seed, and then new ones grow within so many feet. If they're too close together, then the seeds closest to the tree often don't get enough sunlight. So we have to have them spread out a little bit. I could make people out here too. Maybe I shall do that. And I gotta be careful, this is still wet. I kind of smudged it over there. This foreground's wet, so be careful with the hand. Okay, so I've got that. And I'm going to cast some shadows by using that same mixture. And I might build up some form on this. Just a little bit. You see how by adding a little bit of rock texture, the form comes out a little bit. And I don't want to get it too close to the water line here because I want that misty, foggy atmosphere. There we go. Now, whenever I use green, I'm very careful about introducing some of these highlight accent colors towards the end. They can be very potent and very strong, so in this case everything is in this gold and blue. We see these two dominant colors of golden brown and blue and violet. So introducing green, it can actually do something really wonderful to the painting. It can make it pop. If I were to add more reds, I think we'd be in trouble. We would be trying to lean the painting too much in one direction and it would compete with the other. But if we add green, the green can harmonize the golds and the blues. But we don't want it to be super obvious. So I'm going to come in now with some green. I can use that blue that I made and the Hansa Yellow, and that makes an extremely vibrant green. If you look here, I'll show you the palette. See that? That's almost too bright, so I'm going to dim it down with some of that blue I made. I want to mute it. I don't want it to be so bright that it sticks out and doesn't harmonize. There's a tad of that burnt sienna, see? And see, that makes it a little more olive. So that's what I want. I don't necessarily want it to be a bright popping green because then it'll grab its own attention and it won't harmonize with everything. I'll do that with just a little bit of that neutral tint. Let's see if I can get a close up here. It'll be easier. It's too bright. A little more burnt sienna and neutral tint. I don't want it to be screaming green. I want it to hint at green. So usually oranges and greens, you know, secondary colors, I like to mix myself. I might only have one tube of orange and one or two tubes of green, and the rest I just really mix it myself. I use these other colors. Now that is working nicely. It's bringing life into this, where otherwise we would just have elements. We'd have rock and we would have water and sky, but we would not really have an organic living organism in terms of life. So I am now adding the green, and it's really making a nice difference. Green is recessive. It actually goes away from us. If you compare red and green, green recedes while red comes forward. And there we go. That looks nice. I'm going to come over here and do the same thing. Watch my sleeve. And then work some of that into the foreground with some more living organic elements. I need a little more. I think I need more of a coffee than a tea, which means it's going to be slightly thicker, a little more opaque. that's too yellow. Just give me a second here. Okay, that'll work. Yep, getting there. There we go. It's like an olive. Now I don't have to go over every single branch that I just painted. You can have some of it be in the background and overlap. The trunk, yeah, I'll go over the same trunk, but the branches, I like to vary them so it looks as though some are a little more distant. Okay. That works for me. And I'm going to take my 12, this one, my smaller 12, touch up on that green, grab the green, rinse, keep it thin, like tea, and then I'm going to come in on the bank here. Oh, that's nice. Oops. A little too ambitious. Rinse, wipe, and drag a little bit. See that? To soften that down. I don't want it to look like it's just sitting blobs of paint there. Now it pushes it back a little bit. It gives it a little more gradual. I'm going to go do that to the other side. Oh, it worked. Sometimes my camera doesn't go back. It gets stuck, and then I've got to stop the video. Stop the video and make it go back, and then turn it on again. I have to get a new camera. There we go. Now, look at that. Very nice. Starting to have a little more green and a little more life. Little touch there. Okay, now I can build up on that, what I did before. And I want it to be more thicker. More coffee than tea, please. Not so much paint. There we go. And the one on the right hand side I'll make a little bit darker because it's mostly shadow on this side. There we go. Little scrubbing. Rinse, rinse, dry, drag. Now I'm going to tackle the shoreline here with the blue. And I'm going to touch some green in there just a little bit. There we go. The green I add last. The green is like an accent. It's in shallow waters, there's more green, of course. But I don't want it overpowering. Look at that. That's nice. See how that fades out into the background? We gradually go into the distance with that green. It just seems to give it a little more life. Okay, now a darker green with the blue. And the shadows here. And I'm going to hit that green onto the shore right here. The embankment on the underside of maybe some of that rock. Where the moss is. The green. I blur my eyes. I deliberately throw it out of focus so I cannot look at rocks and stones or water waves. It's too bright. So I go to my burnt sienna and I'm going to make a light glaze with it, very thin, and dry off the brush a tad. And I'm just going to come over here, blur my eyes. Oops, that's a little too heavy. Rinse, rinse. I'm going to blur my eyes in the vision here, in my vision, and I'm going to bring this down, the brightness of that rock, using burnt sienna. I think the whole thing needs to be toned down just a bit. Look at that. What a difference. That made a big difference. See, we don't want these popping forward too much. Then they look fake. They need to feel as though they're in the distance. But if they're too bright, then the distance disappears. We lose the illusion of space. Okay. So now I'm taking that gold down a bit, just a bit. Let's see. Taking away some of its glory. There. So all I'm doing is glazing over slightly with a little bit of burnt sienna. And then I'm harmonizing both sides by adding that burnt sienna to both sides. See? The cool side and the warm side. I don't want to disturb the paint that's already underneath. If you notice now, as I start cascading down to the river, I leave some of that mist. I don't want to be painting this all the way down and destroy the atmosphere perspective here. And so again, I blur my eyes, I throw it out of focus, so I'm not focusing on any particular detail, but that what I'm doing is I am harmonizing the composition here. Boy, that looks nice. Much better. Don't you think? I think. Look at that. Much better. Okay. So what I'll do is I'll take my brush and I'll kind of move it and see where a tree might look good. I don't want to do it right exactly here because then there's this implied suggestion that there's thirds. I don't want to make it obvious. But if I do a tree here, that would work. You see, I'm not overcrowding this area. And if I do a tree right here and bring it up, I want to be careful not to tangent that waterfall background. Do you see that? If I put a tree right here, how that would flatten the look? I have to move it. I have to find a place for it, probably right here. That would be a good spot. If I'm over here too much, it's too tall, it's going to tangent the waterfall. If I do it here, it's going to subconsciously divide the painting into thirds. And so we have to be careful when we're composing. Right here, I think this would be good. That works. So I've got this same color I used here with a tad of green in it. The same color I used in these trees. I want it to match this foreground because it harmonizes everything. So I've got a consistency of what I would say is coffee. It's thicker than tea. It's not as thick as milk or cream, or I should say, yeah. I don't want it being too transparent. Not on this kind of detail. And I've got to give the impression that these branches are not going side to side, but actually wrapping around the tree. I'm using a number 1 fine tip line, and my brushes are inexpensive. I don't spend a lot of money on my brushes. I think people can go overboard and brushes are so elaborate. I've seen some amazing you know, Chinese portrait artists that are using these really inexpensive brushes, and so I don't dish a lot of money out into my brushes. And I know Some people do, but I just don't do that. I buy good brushes when I can get them on sale. I don't necessarily buy name brand. I often buy off brand, and that's fine with me. Now I'm doing some shadow, and I'm going to paint a little bit of the rock formation. So you can see here, I've dropped in some shadow, and I'm going to let some of these rocks emerge the way they, I've got some green in there, I've got pale, see, just take advantage of that landscape a little bit. And that can work. And now for this side, I think I might do, let's see, one more tree here. One more. Yeah, that'll work. So this is the part you breathe, right? You go, oh, whew, all the hard work's done. So atmospheric painting, there's it's what you don't paint that actually makes it work. It's not painting the mist, not trying to work and paint the mist. It's not painting the wave. You kind of got to let it emerge. Not painting, trying too hard. You have to let things emerge and breathe. Okay? Not painting the sky too hard, not painting the top of the water line, but actually defining a little bit of the sky where the water line meets. See? So it's things like that. It's more of a implied than it is a direct descriptive approach in watercolor. Okay, now I'm going to back out, and something caught my eye I really like. I'll show you what it is. Do you see this soft rose color here? That adds so much to the painting that I am now going to put that in. So I've got to come out, rinse, and go to my, it says number 12 at one time. Anyway, this brush, my medium round. And the one thing nice about this paper is it doesn't cauliflower super easy. I mean, it does if the water just sits on top of it and you go back over it. But I'm using dry water. In other words, just a little bit of water. Dry brushing that water, and then I'm going to grab just the smallest smidgen amount of a very faint tint of that Quinacridone Rose, with a tad of gold in it. I think that's what went on here. Yep. It's a risk. Why go in and, you know, mess something up that already looks good? But I think it'll be worth it. I'm going to take that risk. There it is, the Quinacridone Gold with a little Hansa Yellow. Like the smallest tad you can ever see of yellow. Just a tad. I don't want to turn the water green, right? Ooh, I like that. It's a risk. What are you doing? Yeah, it's a risk. Go in, be bold, be brave. Oh, yeah. Yeah, that works. Look at that. Now I'm dry brushing, so once I got it in there, I've got to gingerly blend it in and not let it sit and soak, and I don't want it to cauliflower. And you know what? That is just, there's something about this. I'm liking how it is warming. Look at that. Oh boy. I almost missed it, didn't I? Look at that. Boy, did that add or what? Isn't that dreamy? It's almost like the way the sun is hitting that mist, the way the sun just hits and glints off of that mist. That is really nice. I like that. I don't know about you, but that works for me. So what I'm doing is I'm rinsing, I'm drying, I'm dry brushing, rinsing, drying, and moving that around with the side of the brush. Yeah, that works. Just rosied that up nicely. It's like the sun just hitting just right. Sometimes you see something and it's mysterious. It's like something hidden there trying to emerge, and you have to follow it. It's a risk, but you have to follow what that painting is trying to tell you it wants to be. And so I just did that. Look at that. And I'm going to soften this water. I told you earlier on that when I was finished with this, I was going to come back around and harmonize everything, and that's kind of what's going on here. And regarding the falls, I don't want them to be too flat. So I'm going to come in here with that nice blue, and I'm going to etch some of the splits in the waterfall, just a tad. Sometimes there's rock formations underneath. That's nice. Here's where you start to get all the colors working together. You have to go back over sometimes and make them come together. Okay, now, that's pretty cool. I'm going to come back in now and put some background up here, foresty thing. I know we're looking up. Our vanishing point, you see how these cut back? And they come back like this? Our vanishing point to our eye level is probably right about here. Okay? So anything we're looking up at whatever is behind there is going, how do I show you? It's going this way in the perspective. It's coming up vertically but going that way. So we can't make it look like it's just flat. We have to really kind of draw that in perspective, or paint it in perspective, I should say. Okay, I'm making violet with that Quinacridone Rose and a little bit of that blue, not too deep, just a little paler, and a touch of the sky color, cerulean. Why? Because it's distant. We have atmosphere. Okay, now I'm going to come up here. Yep, that'll work. See that? Might not seem much to you there. Do you see that? We're going to put some background here, up in the highland here. That looks good. Okay, back out, back. That looks pretty good. See that? I'm going to push this back. It's too bright. It's got to be a little misty. There. It's too close. It needs to be washed out just a tad. It's got to feel misty and in the distance. There. That works. All right. One of those nice surprises towards the end I didn't expect. I'm going to put a kayak, some little thing right here. So I'll put it with some of that foreground color. I might accent it a little. I don't want to rob from the mountains here, so it will be small. And a neutral color, pretty much like these rocks. If you've hung with me so far, I'm going to sign it and strip the tape off, and we'll see what we have. And I'm going to pop this into my journal, and there it is. So I hope you enjoyed this. I hope it was beneficial for you and you learned something. If you were painting along, that's fantastic. I have other videos. I have some animal drawing, and eventually I will release, I have like over 100 animal anatomy, animal drawing, and motion study videos I did when I was teaching at a university. But things have changed since then, and my technique of how I work, we're in a different kind of setting here, so I'm making it more user-friendly and applicable to my YouTube people who want to tune into this. So anyway, I appreciate you sticking around, and stay tuned for more. I really appreciate your comments below, and please like and please return and subscribe. Take care. Be blessed. Bye-bye.